Okay, started recording. So good evening to everybody and to our viewers that are looking at this recording on YouTube or listening to us. Do you hear me properly? Yes, no. Excellent. Okay, so we'll start. If people will join, excellent. If not, people can, of course, watch afterwards. Today, we're going to discuss duality. So even though we spoke about some other things we're going to talk about today, I had some people writing to me that seen the recording and they had several questions. So we're going to try and touch on concepts of duality today. What is duality in our time? What is duality in a postmodern age? What is duality in our life? And so on. We'll try to take snippets out of different themes and topics where we have dual approaches, where we have a multitude or multiplicity even of faiths, of beliefs, of values, of consciousness, and of self, maybe even. And try to understand, are those aspects changing our Jewish life? If so, is it positive? Is it something we need to reconcile with? Is it something we need to struggle with? Okay, and we'll try to see different thinkers, not only postmodern ones, and to see what difference do we have today from aspects we had in the past. So I'm sharing now the screen to our source sheet. This was also sent in the WhatsApp group for those who would wish to print it and to see it differently. I want us to start with Rav Menachem Froman. Okay. Rav Froman was also a poet, as many of us know. And if not, I recommend, even if your Hebrew is not as fluent as you would wish it to be, even just the pronunciation of his poems, I think, could resonate, even if you understand only the fractions of it. In any case, I want us to read a poem about history by Rav Froman, and then I'll read it in Hebrew. I'll paraphrase it into English as we go. Naturally, as it's a poem, it's more poetic, there's a lot of metaphors, so I will be even more paraphrasing it from usual. מול חוף הים באשקלון. אמנם כן, אין לי על מה להישען, אלא על הגלים. I have nothing to lean on but the galim. אין לי על מה להישען, of course, is a very known idiom for אין לי על מה להישען, אלא על אבינו שבשמיים, right? Something we used to say. Over here he says on the waves, על הגלים, the waves of the ocean. I can only lean on waves of ocean. Naturally, one cannot really lean on waves of the ocean. עמודי השיש אינם עומדים עוד. החומות נפרצו. חצי חדר, השאר תלוי באוויר. מי בנה אותם? מי זוכר את האיש שישב בחדר מעל הגלים והביט בגאות? Right? The marble pillars are no longer standing. If you've been to Ashkelon as a tourist, on the coast, there are huge marble columns from the Philistine era, not actually probably not from the Philistines themselves, but very ancient. Some of them are Roman, so much later, but in any case, a lot of pillars standing and nobody remembers them. And he says, who remembers the man that was sitting in the room above the waves? Ve'bit bagut, and he look at the tide. Yigashu velo yochlu, yehemu velo yavohu. They are so loud, they are everywhere, right? And they're not passing. Naturally, it also resonates words from the prayer. וחשב על גלי האויב המסתערים על עירו שנכבשה שוב ונכבשה שוב, פלישתים, יוונים, רומאים, ביזנטים, ערבים, צלבנים, ושוב ערבים, ושוב צלבנים. And he thinks about the waves of the enemy, right? Storming his town, Ashkelon, that was conquered and reconquered, but all of those peoples. ואני, and myself, Rav Froman, שבאתי בגאוותי למצוא בנקודה יהודית, that I came to look for a Jewish spot, steady as nearby Negba. Negba is a very known kibbutz, secular kibbutz, very known in the Negev. שעמדה מול גלי מתקפות האויב. הוכרעתי להודות על האמת. דבר אחד נשאר יציב. הגלים השוטפים את העמודים המוטלים בחוף בחול, כמו גלי התורים. I had to admit that one thing was stable. Unlike Negba, right? Or similar to Negba, but unlike what I looked for. It depends how you read the poem. That are judging the walls of sanity, of proud sanity. מכסים ושוב מכסים את העמודים הנופלים. Covering and covering again the either deconstructed or falling down. Again, depends how you read the poem. העמודים הנופלים, pillars. אומנם כן, but even though אין לי על מה להישען, אלא על הגלים של המילים התרופות האלה. I have nothing to lean on but the words of these words, this crazy words, okay? These crazy words. So again, translating poems, paraphrasing poems, and then trying to go with them is a bit more tricky than regular sources, but I do want us to look at this. Rav Froman is basically saying here, we have two problems in our time. And again, we're talking about duality, right? So the duality of our sense of self in history is very unique in a postmodern time, in 2020. How is that unique? We are on one hand insignificant. We have very broad understanding of history, even prehistorical history, right? We can conceptualize dinosaurs and all sorts of things and events that have nothing to do with us. But even human history, we have an awareness that history is not only changing, but it's also much longer than anything we can experience in our lifetime and perceive. That's on one hand. On the other hand, we are also in a place that because we are in a time of stories, right? Narratives are stories. We're telling stories. Then we are looking for places we can incorporate ourselves into a story. Okay? And we're doing that without even thinking. We're putting ourselves into a story. And what Rav Froman is saying here, that when he comes as a religious Zionist, right, rabbi in Israel, coming to Ashkelon and looking for this place that is very Zionist, very Jewish, indigenous, he finds different stories. And not only that, he doesn't even find the stories of the actual people that lived in Ashkelon. He knows about the Philistines, about the Crusades, about Arabs, about Byzantine, and so on. He doesn't know about the person that lived near the coast in Ashkelon. There's no story about that. We don't have a diary or something. So that person is insignificant in history. And Rav Froman himself is saying, maybe I'm insignificant? And he says, I came to find a Jewish point, but maybe we cannot locate our Jewish point in every story. So the lack of self and the pointing of selves, or pinning ourselves in history, is not only individual, it's also as a people, as an ethnical, as a religious, as a people. Okay, the Jewish people is not in every story, even in the birthplace of Judaism, even in Eretz Israel itself. Naturally, if we're talking about America, if we're talking about other diasporas, right? And that duality of conscience is very troubling, because our very notion of identity is grounded many times in history. And if we are lacking from history, then there's a problem. Something is missing. Okay? Any points so far, or any comments before we move on? Okay, so I wanted us to start with history, because even though it sounds like this is the easiest or something that is not really triggering new concepts in our Jewish life, we'll see just a minute. We'll see when we'll finish it with Rav Shagar and duality of sacred and holy, that actually the duality in history has huge implications for us. Yes. You had a question?
Yeah, is there a play here between Ashkelon being like historically in Tanakh it was an Ir Plishti, and now sitting on it as a, holding a Jewish identity in the section of the land that holds Israeli identity, looking at the same water as, people who are so close but so far, through another city that was also Plishti identity.
It's a poem, right? So you can read everything into this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but I think the choosing of Ashkelon is there's a reason it's Ashkelon and not other cities that might have a more concrete Jewish identity. Okay. Yeah. So definitely, I think that lacking is a choice. Okay. I hope I answered your question. So.
It's okay.
Okay, so I want us to go now to secular and sacred. Okay, something that might be a bit more natural for us to think of when we think about duality in our Jewish life. And I'm reading. בעולם של רובנו יש צדדים שונים של חול ושל קודש. אכן, ישנם אנשים מסוגלים לחיות חיים מלאים ועשירים בעולם הקודש. אך רובנו איננו יכולים, ואולי גם איננו צריכים לחיות ככה. All of us have different sides, sacred and secular. Some people can live a full life in the sacred world, holy people. Most of us can't, maybe even shouldn't. לכן עלינו לזהות גם בעולמות החול ומה הקדושה שלהם. So we have to identify, even in the secular world, what's holy, what is sacred. Okay? חשוב מאוד לשמור על האיזון המתאים לנו. It's very important that we are rebalanced for ourselves, not balanced globally. מצד אחד לעבוד על מנת שנרגיש בבית בעולם של תורה ומצוות. We have to feel at home in תורה ומצוות. מצד שני, טיפוח יכול להיפגש עם השם גם בעולם החול, but we have to meet God and or divinity also in the secular world. Okay? שני צדדים אלה עשויים להשלים זה את זה. Those both sides need to complete each other. Okay, I'm skipping a bit. המציאות היא שהאור איננו נמצא במקום אחד. The light, right, or the divine light. I mean, that's of course the or that is coming from before creation or with creation. Zohar, okay, if you know the meaning of or. האור מעורב עם החושך והגבולות אינם ברורים. Light is infused, is mixed with darkness, and the lines between them, the limits, the borders are not clear. כאשר אדם מתקן מידה אחת, הוא צריך לדעת שהוא תיקן דבר אחד, אבל הוא לקלקל בו זמנית עניין אחר באישיותו. So even if we're dealing with one aspect of our personality, and we're fixing it, meaning we are more aware of sacred, or we're more religious, we're more frum, we're more observant, whatever, we're more good, we're better people. At the same time, that amendment, that correction, that avodat hamidot could harm something else. למשל, אדם שהוא עדין, ביישן ומופנם, יכול להחליט שהוא משתנה ונעשה אחד מאחר, somebody that is always shy could decide that he's becoming one of the gods. He could do it, but then he might find out he lost his sensitivity to create more profound, deeper touch with people. So he gained one thing and he lost one thing. כך גם באשר למחלוקת בדתיים נכונים. This is also in a dispute between religious people and secular people. And I remind again that Rav Shagar is speaking about secular and religious in Israel and not in America, and it's something else in the States, because secular Judaism in the States is more it's not Jewish, right? It's not Jewish secularism. It's more affiliated, or it's more identified with the main non-Jewish culture. Even if we can think with our illusion that all things that are good, all the best stuff are with the firms, right? And all the worst are with the secular. But it's not true. Some of this and some of that, right? And we should also know that the good is not despite the fact that they're secular, it's because they're secular. And even though it's good, and that's important here, למרות שדברים האלה טובים, אינם מתאימים לי, they're not for me. Because myself, my definition, my self-definition as a religious person brings it to the fact that I cannot do it. I cannot fulfill it. Okay, and some of my wisdom should be knowing how to give up, how to let go on good stuff, on good ethic, on good values. And now not to think that we need to have totality in our life. Okay? עלינו לוותר על הטוב שבחילוניות ולהשאיר אותו לחילונים. We need sometimes to let go on what's good for the secular Jews and let it be for them. Okay? Totality, being, always immersed 100% black and white is a religious problem, right? We are drawn to either or. But if you are not happy with learning half a page of Gemara, you won't be happy even if you learn the entire Shas. Okay? What is Rav Shagar saying here? Okay? First of all, we need to understand no world in the eyes of Rav Shagar is complete. Meaning, not the religious world, neither the secular world are complete. We don't have a complete identity of religious Jews that we can say this identity is intact in the sense that it's 100% good. And neither are the secular. The worlds are not all choshech. There are things here and there. And we need to learn how to accept stuff that are positive, matters that are positive from the secular world. Even though it's from the secular world and it's draws from the secular reality, the non-religious reality. Okay? What does that allows us to do? It allows us to gain positive values and virtues from Torah. Letting go on matters that are good within secular Judaism, allowing it to remain good only in another segment of our people, and taking matters that are good, that have value, have a merit from the secular world into our religious life, will allow us to discover more good, more, I wouldn't say better, but maybe more influential or existential values for us within that are immersed in the Torah. Okay, I want to pause here for a sec. Aviel, where does this meet you? Are you with us? Do you agree with Rav Shagar? Disagree?
I think it makes a lot of sense in general about any way of life, that there's always going to be limitations to it, or perhaps things that it doesn't do so well as other ways of life. And definitely when it comes to Chiloniyut and Datiyut. But I do have a question. I was wondering, does he think that, like in many instances, I think people would say, all right, okay, so I agree that I should bring in things into my religious life, which I can learn from the Chiloniim. But the question is, what if that involves changing my religious world a little bit? At what point do I have to say that this is something that is beyond my reach and that I have to leave it to the Chiloniim to be good at it?
Could you give me an example of something you think about?
The first example that comes to mind, let's see, what's a good example? I guess a good one, if somebody would say pluralism, is a good thing of secular people, that they are more, they have less restrictions and so are able to socialize with more people or something like that, and that they're more hospitable that way. But you also have to acknowledge that you have kashrut, for example, and that kashrut places limitations on whom you can socialize with. And maybe you can socialize in other ways, but there's still going to be limitations in place.
So, okay, I lost you for a second. I don't know if you still hear me. Yes?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Blacked out for a sec. So I heard, but I heard what you said. So I think kashrut is a good example. Okay? And I think we can see already in halacha, in Rishonim, right? We don't need to go to halacha, people that are here today. We can see sort of a balance between halachic lifestyle that is within your house and the rules that you need to obey. Where, that's A. B, where can you be, meaning where can you go to eat at and where you cannot eat at. And C, what are the solutions you have in order to eat at places you are not allowed to eat at. Meaning you already have inside the systems, the kashrut system, solutions for things you can do in places you cannot eat at or drink at. Okay? In terms of which vessels you can use, what is considered a bishul, and so on, and so on. I don't want to go into all this stuff. But so that's a good example. Now, but I think in our time, you're asking properly, things could be seen as judgmental because we want to be, as you said properly, right? In a secular society, pluralism assumes that if I will say to somebody, your food is wrong, right? Is not good. I cannot eat at your house, and so on. It could be looked as offensive. And we are very troubled in our time by being offensive. Okay? Not always, but in a way, because that sort of triggers a notion that we're not pluralist enough. I know I want to go into the discussion if it's true or not. What do I think about being offensive? What pluralism? That's a whole different discussion. But I'm saying that's the notion. Now, I think what Rav Shagar is saying here is that sometimes we need to understand that as from Jews, we are offensive. Manasot, we're offensive. It's not good to be offensive. Maybe it's better to eat everywhere. I mean, really, it's respect. It's showing respect to your host. It's really good. But we cannot do this. We have different boxes and limitations that are not allowing us to do it. So we are not as good. Mamash kacha. Okay? On the other hand, I think he says, you also need to know when to let go on aspects that could draw, I would say, I would phrase it differently. I think, for example, in kashrut, I'll do it through a story. When I was living in New Zealand in the past, and we were hosting a lot of people, Jewish people mostly. We were in the Jewish community. Most of them, 99% of them, from Eton, no matter Orthodox, Reform, whatever, were not observant. They might be registered, right, members in the Orthodox shul, but they weren't observant. So their kashrut level was not something we could rely on. But they always brought food when they come. So what do you do? What do you do when people brings food to your house? You cannot eat the food. Bring wine that is not kosher, right? What do you do? So we 99% of the time we forgot to serve it. We took it politely, we thanked them, we put it in the kitchen, we told them we're going to serve it, and we politely forgot to serve it. Now you could say, okay, that's manners. Manners is not a postmodern solution. You know how to be mannered. Okay, that you can put that. But there's also something a bit more layered here. And I think that's the fact that we really didn't want to tell them they're not kosher. It's not just to be mannered. It's also to understand there's a merit in their lifestyle that on Shabbat, their food is okay for them. I will not be a part of it, but I will not be the one that judges them on their food. I won't use it. I'll find a way, to not to use it and so on, not to serve it, but I won't judge them. Meaning, I would gain appreciation of their lifestyle. I won't share their lifestyle, but I'll gain appreciation of that. And that will allow me to see different aspects of Torah. Now, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's nuanced. I think it's things you just do in life. It's not really something, I can say, Rav Shagar or myself or anyone have this equation. If you do X, then this is what you do. I think it's more nuanced based on just events you see and encounter. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, now I want us to go to a different aspect of duality, very different from what we spoke now. And I want us to go to Rav Soloveitchik. Now, I want to just point out before I read, of course, Rav Soloveitchik was not postmodern, to say the least. Right? Rav Soloveitchik was very modern. And he was even maybe against postmodernism, at least against the several representations of postmodernism. And it is talking about this. התורה מעריכה בפרשת מעשה בראשית ללמדנו לימוד חשוב יותר. ללכת בכל דרכיו. What is to follow God's path? להורות לאדם להידמות לבוראו. How could we resemble our Creator? ולהיות אף הוא יוצר, and how could we become creators? Right? Of course, בורא and יוצר, right? It's an important differentiation that works in Hebrew. אל ינענע האדם בראשו לומר שדרישה זו מאדם היא בלתי אפשרית. Don't say it's impossible. מפני שאינו יכול לדמות ביצירה לבוראו. אלא לכל היותר יכול הוא אולי לסגל לעצמו משהו משאר מידותיו. But more, the most you could maybe adapt and מידה, right? Something, חסד, רחמים, something. אף על פי כן, but even though the Torah commands us to relentlessly be like, to create in our world and to resemble God. What does that mean? החלל הקבלי אותו פינתה האלוקות, ובו אפשרה את בריאת העולם, הוא בעל משמעות מעשית. The צמצום, right, of the world, when the world was created, has practical meaning. This space is the place where creation, our creation, as partners with God in Maaseh Bereshit, is being done, right? Is being amended. ריבונו של עולם מבדיל בין האור ובין החושך. אך לא ביטול את מציאותו של החושך. There is still darkness in the world, right? God הבדיל בין אור לחושך. There's between light and darkness, but he didn't never cancel darkness. תעודת האדם היא להמשיך במלאכת היצירה. We need to do this. This is our task. Okay, I'm skipping a bit. אם נהרות איתן של מים אדירים עולים על הגדות ומציפים שטחים גדולים ומרחיבים יישובים פורחים, מתפקידו של האדם לשפר את תנאי הסביבה ולבסס זרימת נהרות ולהגן על התרבות. If we have flooding going around today, it's very, right, with all the corona and global warming, everything is very relevant. If the nature, right, we have floods going on, rising, water, and really desecrating and destroying all sorts of towns and so on. Our job is to amend environment, is to לתקן עולם in practical sense, meaning to change the flow of the rivers in order to protect our culture. בכוונה לא ביטל הקדוש ברוך הוא את הרע. It was purposely they never void the bad, the evil, because we need to be active. את ההתחלה עשה הקדוש ברוך הוא, ואילו הגמר הוא תפקידו של העולם. God started it, but we need to finish. Now, why do I bring this here? As I see it, what Rav Soloveitchik is speaking about is that our work, our world, our work, our human activity could be both secular and sacred at the same time. Okay? And this is a crucial understanding that is differentiating postmodernism and modernism. Okay, naturally you can also embed a lot of modernism, within postmodernism. So you have that concept within postmodernism because they're not conflicting, they're chronological. However, it's different. And what's the difference? Rav Soloveitchik is not trying to separate and to tell us there's a secular world and there's a religious world. There's a secular understanding and there's a religious understanding. Rav Soloveitchik is saying we have one world, one reality, one truth, one narrative. Okay, it's objective, it's not subjective. And our dual task is to understand that our secular life are also sacred. Okay? And this is something crucial to understand. Because everything a man does, okay, maybe not virtual, but that's a good question. It's about Rav Soloveitchik and the virtual world. But putting aside our virtual reality, everything we do in the world has religious significance. Okay? Mamash, building, it has religious significance. Not only Eretz Israel, it's not a Zionist, Rav Kook or Rav Tzvi Yehuda, Rav Nazir, and so on, understanding. It's about life in the world as a sacred duty for our reality. Okay? And that's different. That's different from what we read before. Any comments on Rav Soloveitchik before we continue? Okay. Another modern way to do it, and there's a reason I want us to see those ways as well. Another is Buber. Okay, Buber is secular. Okay. And he is seeing similar problems. And he's saying this, שום יחיד לא יגיע אל קן הציפור, כך מכנה הזוהר את מקומו של המשיח. Buber is a secular Jew. I must mention, if people don't know, either you or people that are listening to this on YouTube or listening elsewhere, Buber is a secular thinker, is a very spiritual, very believing Jew, but is secular, Zionist. כך מכנה הזוהר את מקומו של המשיח. אבל 100 איש מלוכדים ומאוחדים יגיעו אליו. One individual cannot reach the Mashiach, but 100 people could reach the Mashiach. I'm sorry. If they'll go one on top of the shoulder of the other, meaning they'll create a ladder. מה חייב ישראל לעשות בכדי לגאול את עצמו? What do we need to do in order to redeem ourselves? In order to create הגשמה of truth to ourselves? What we need to do? We need to make communities. Okay? מעל לכל שמו של מי שאינו השם, הוא תכלית כל הגשמה. רב החסד הקרוב לכל הבאים להגשימו, ולא אומר בדברים, אפילו מדעים בנפשם, שאף יצאו ממורות אלוקים, כשם שיצאו מתחום מושגים כתומים, ואילו בלתי נודע דמים לריפויי ההגשמה, החוזרים על כינוי אלוקים משנים לשנים, כי במה זו המעלה גרה, הללו שרק חברת אמת עשויה לגע להם, למען יזכו ברבות היום לחיי אמת. I'll paraphrase this. Even if we live in a society that is just mumbling different words, different lingo, different sentences about God, about divinity, about God's control in our world, we are nothing more than animals. Okay, from behemoth. We like a behemoth. Right? What can we do in order to really reach God? We need not to speak, right? Not to think that we are no longer under the divine existence of Hashem. What we need to do is join together in order to reach an understanding of Hashem. Meaning, there's a problem in the secular world. The problem in the secular world, the problem of our reality based on Buber, is that it either gives you an illusion that there's no God, right? A very secular understanding of the world, or it gives you an illusion that you can reach God alone. And Buber says, no, you need a community, okay? A community is important. And why am I bringing Buber here? Because the secular modern solution for duality of our existence is creating communities. Creating communities allows us to create social gatherings that are creating a sense of holiness. Community is not a modern construct. It's very old. It's very traditional, right? We have it in Torah, Bria, Chala, from the beginning. But what is different in communities in the modern time is that our community allows us to leap from our own personal understanding, meaning we have an intellectual task to the community rather than an intellectual task to the rabbi, to the Rav, or to the philosopher, or to the Navi. And in order to reach the Mashiach, we need a community. Okay? Why is that answers the problem of duality? Because in a community, we're not sensing the lack of sacredness, because we can find sacred, the holy, we can find the sacred at the other. Okay, it's another person. Okay, and that's what Buber is saying. And so we can find both the secular and the sacred by looking at each other's eyes. Okay, by praying together, by talking together. Okay, so that's another solution. Sort of Soloveitchik suggests one solution, Buber suggests another solution, and in the postmodern reality, those solutions, Buber's solution, losing a bit of its grip, because we live in a very individual lifestyle. Okay, any comments? Any questions? Okay, so I just want to say, before we go to the last piece of Rav Shagar, we need to realize and we need to remember that postmodernism and the Jewish approach to postmodernism comes and draws from the fact that we're individuals. Now, being individuals was always something, was always the reality. But postmodernism allows our individuality to be aware of itself, which we spoke about it last week. And also, it allows us to live within a world where we don't have a community. Our narrative, our story is only of ourselves. Okay, as we've seen with Rav Froman's poem at the beginning. Meaning, we're looking for this author that lived above the waves at some, 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. We're not looking for the Philistines or the Romans. We're looking for a specific person. I am Rav Froman, a specific person. I am Rav Shagar, a specific person. I am Rav Kook, a specific person. All of the Rabbanim are specific individuals. Okay? We are aware of this. And we also aware we are individuals. Udi is individual. Any one of us here are individuals. That awareness troubles us in establishing a community that thinks we can be on top of each other, because each of us is really located in a different place. So it's much more, it's very hard for us to tap naturally into Buber's reading of Jewish life, even though today he has sort of a renaissance of his writings and people are rereading and rediscovering. Okay, let's go to Rav Shagar. Now, I'll read it again in Hebrew, I'll paraphrase, and then we'll see. בשלב ראשון, at first, כאשר אנשים עדיין צעירים, הם מחפשים את דרכם הרוחנית. When people are young, they're looking for their spiritual, for their religious path. When? שלב הבא, אחר שהם למדו וקיבלו תשובות, פיתחו מתודות למידה וחשיבה, when they are, after they study, they receive answers, they have all sorts of methods to think and to study, הם מתקשים להשתחרר מהתובנות שהם יצבו בעצמם, הם מפסיקים לחפש. They have a huge difficulty to let go of the understandings they themselves have designed for themselves, and they stop looking for it. Okay? Imagine a person that worked and labored so many years on a specific way of limud, and he found his way, his path in limud, that he's accustomed to, he's good at. Now, sometimes he senses that he's repeating himself, and he's not renewing anything, he's not making any progress, but he's continuing with the same method. With it, he once taught a good lesson. With it, he sees the exclusive shita, the exclusive method to study, and he cannot be open to anything else. Okay? This is very difficult, not only for limud, not only for intellectually, but also spiritually. What draws men away from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, from God, is thinking he already knows, he already accomplished something. The true tzaddik purpose is to break that consciousness, to educate that faith when man is secure is not a faith where in it. A person he is secure is not necessarily the right faith. His bitachon, his security within it, might be false, and maybe the distance between him and God is not even smaller than the distance between a common person and God, while he's disregarding that common person. Okay, and he needs to start over and over again. Okay, this is something crucial, meaning we have a problem understanding we always need to reinvent ourselves. Another thing that Rav Shagar is saying here, the tzaddik is working with those who are at the bottom. We are sort of limiting ourselves. We're trying to nullify part of reality, meaning lowering the existence of God into the day-to-day life. The challenge here is to show a person that is away from God that God is with him. Meaning the opposite, that the tzaddik needs to show. And what is Rav Shagar's story? There's a story here. What do you do when you go to Shiva? Okay, somebody passed away. You go to a Shiva to comfort your friend or family member. Do you start to tell him, well, don't worry, he's in heaven now. Don't worry, he's reincarnated. No, don't worry, and so on and so on and so on. He won't. That won't give him any comfort. A lot of times, you won't even believe it yourself. But even Rav Shagar is saying, but even if you believe it, even if you mamash truly believe it, that won't comfort him. However, what can comfort a person? Dibur amiti. If you speak from your heart, if you say God is with you, even if it's difficult now, God is with us, even in difficult times. You won't try to rationalize or to tell him stories about why is it not bad. But you'll tell him, even though it's bad, God is with you in your bad place. It's bad for HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. It's a negative experience not only for you, but for the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? And Shtei Bchinot Ele, both of those are not only about the place of the spiritual place, position of man, but also to how we are working towards God. How are we fulfilling the mitzvah? Okay. Now he speaks. I'll paraphrase again. You have the sources in front of you, and it's in the source sheet in the WhatsApp group, so you can see it there as well. What do you reach? What is our ideal when we're trying to reach sacred? The Hindu ideal is to reach nirvana. What is nirvana, right? Nirvana is, Rav Shagar is saying, reaching complete silence, serenity, right? You know, Rabbi Nachman calls it Ayeh Mekom Kvodo. Where Ayeh in Hebrew today, even today, Ayeh, it's a word with a lot of meaning. Where is the place of God? Where is the place of his honor, the divinity? Okay? Meaning being only aware of this, not being aware of our reality at all, thinking only up high. However, what Rav Shagar is saying, what the problem with this is that we have a lack of ability, if we're doing this, to just do regular, mundane human activities. And he says, even in our own tradition, we had spiritual methods where controlling an activity that was secular in regular reality, ordinary life, it was also seen as something low and unimportant. But even those who went to mamash nezirut, right, to prishut, they never hated life. They never went against reality. Okay. What we need to do, and this is what Rav Shagar is ending with, the ideal is not only to reach Ayeh, it's not only to reach Nirvana, it's not only to reach serenity with the divine. It's not only to nullify our existence in order to be in a spiritual place. Earthly, regular, גשמיות, הפעילות הארצית צריכה להתבצע מתוך הקשר רוחני, from spiritual context. הדרכה של רבי נחמן היא שאין לאחוז בקצה אחד בלבד. We don't need to only hold one segment of our stick, one side of our stick, but both. The Jewish position, תפקיד היהודי, our job is to hold both sides. To one hand, to sanctify life, regular life. On the other hand, is to, I don't know how you would say it in English, but to make a bit of the gashmiyut into our spiritual life, meaning to create a more earthly, a more earthbound, human-bound experience of our spiritual existence. Okay? Those two must be held at the same time. It's very different from the modern solutions we've seen to our duality. It's contextual, meaning we need to live within a context. Sometimes we need to reach serenity, ayeh, nirvana, however we want to read it, meditate and think and pray and daven, like mamash, to reach high, to reach above. Sometimes we need to work to do something very common, very gashmi, very parnasa, or very artzi, something regular, mundane. And sometimes we need to mix them together and to see what's sacred in our mundane and what's mundane in sacred. And this influx of realities is something that we need to work with. Any comments before we're closing this year? Questions?
So I think this isn't the specific point he makes, but I could see how they both feed into each other. So the first approach of humility, where one recognizes that the Hasagat Elokim isn't mamash, might be not right, is the one that allows you to more fully accept the idea that Melo kol haaretz kivodo, you just haven't uncovered it yet. What seems familiar to you and maybe old and tired isn't it all, and that you can keep going and perhaps you'll find something even greater and deeper.
Okay. I agree. It wasn't a question really, it's more of a comment, I think, right? Okay. I think in general, in Rav Shagar's writing, or not only in Rav Shagar, I mean, Rav Shagar is definitely the most prominent, I think, but in every Jewish thinker that is trying to encompass postmodernism into our tradition, or to encompass our tradition in postmodernism, it doesn't matter on which side you look at it, and is not going from a very philosophical, academic, right, Litva way, but trying to really see how that lived. Then, Melo kol haaretz kivodo, as you very properly put it, and looking for it is really not only a solution, but also our ability to understand that all narratives are part of this Mekom Kvodo, right? And the fact that we have to conceptualize our reality, both are also a very mundane, earthly, gashmiyut reality as a part of this Mekom Kvodo. Okay, because we need to understand that in the narrative environment, meaning in a society that we understand each of us is individual. We have different, unlike Buber, when he says we can only as a community reach God and reach the Mashiach. In our reality, because we are affected and because of Rabbi Nachman and also the Rebbe and other Hasidic thinkers, Rav Tzadok and others that are really sort of mevasrim, are giving us also already redemptive notions of postmodernism long before postmodernism existed as a philosophical construct. They allow us to see that there's multiplicity of sacredness, meaning there's God everywhere, okay, in different experiences, in different stories. The Hasidic stories are stories. What does that mean, Melo Kol Haaretz Kvodo? It means we can tell stories about God from everywhere and from everything. And stories are really different words for narrative. So when we tell Hasidic stories, we tell different Hasidic narratives. And we understand there are sacred narratives within different experiences a man is doing. Some of them is by praying in a Yom Kippur in a field, and so it's very spiritual, very as we've seen like in Hindu life, right? And lehavdil kamuvan, but in the sense of how we understand it today. And some are just a glon, somebody that drives a horse or something in the market, right? And both can find God in a similar context or in a very different context, but it's on the same level, right? So I think this is very crucial to understand that we need to, and it's crucial to understand Rav Shagar, because if, for example, and that's not a criticism, it's just an observation. If you see Rav Shagar's articles that were translated in the last book that was translated, not in the new one will come out soon, but in the book that was translated about 2 years ago, most of the articles there are very philosophical. And that's also true for other postmodern thinkers, Jewish postmodern thinkers. It was very philosophical. It was very up here. But really, we need to understand there's a concept here of really embracing reality, embracing it as an embracing divinity, embracing sacredness, holiness within our reality. So it's something very crucial, as you said, to find the Kvod Hashem, to find God everywhere in your life. So this was our session for today. Next week, I hope we'll go to Torah, and we'll try to understand and to talk about Torah and Kabbalah Torah and our understanding of that. We'll see. I'm not as committing to that as I did last week, because I've seen some people that are listening to us have different questions, and so it draws us to different paths, but I think it's good, and we have also plans for the future after listening. So thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me tonight, and thank you for those who are listening or viewing us on our YouTube. Laila Tov.